right, boys and girls, we are back with another edition of The Big Ben Show. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. You can follow me on X at bdomenech. Follow the show at Big Ben Show Fox on X, on Instagram. And I hope that you will leave a review, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, and leave a comment about what you think of today's show. I want to start with the craziness that we see going on within the Democratic coalition. But they assure us that that's not actually the problem here.
We must remember, in a time such as this, we are not the crazy ones, New York City. We are not the outlandish ones, New York City. They want us to think we are crazy. We are sane.
You know, this is from a rally that featured the likes of Zoran Mamdani, Bernie Sanders, AOC, and of course, you also saw the Democratic establishment coming in to back Mamdani at the late stages, including Hakeem Jeffries and, of course, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who had to stand up on the stage and listen to chants of "tax the rich." She responded, "I can hear you," and then followed up with this.
Couldn't hear what they were chanting. I thought they were saying "Let's go Bills." I wasn't sure. When you're up there, I heard some noise. I heard a lot of cheers, but later on it became clear to me that I know there's passion for that. I mean, I went in there as the leader of the Democratic Party, whose job it is to unify behind the Democratic nominee. I love the energy out there.
Tax the rich, let's go Bills. Sounds the same. Brandon's got to be in there somewhere. A new report out, reported in Semaphore by Dave Weigel from the group Welcome, which surveyed hundreds of thousands of voters over 6 months in terms of trying to discover and do an autopsy on why Democrats have been losing in these past couple of elections, found that over 70% of voters think the Democratic Party is, quote, out of touch. Most voters, the group found, believe the party over-prioritizes issues like protecting the rights of LGBTQ Americans and fighting climate change while not caring about, quote, securing the border or, quote, lowering the rate of crime. This is a PAC that is operated by Greg Schultz, who managed Joe Biden's 2020 primary campaign, though he was replaced for the general election. For the last 20 years, Democrats have just misunderstood how you actually win elections, Schultz told Semaphore. "I thought Biden had proven in the 2020 primary that the base of the Democratic Party is a 58-year-old woman without a college degree. But when you hear people in D.C. say the base, they mean white intellectuals that live in a few coastal cities." The Democrats as a coalition are currently embracing the most radical elements of their party. And I think that there is a false supposition on the part of some within the swamp, certainly many Democrats who have more centrist predilections, if not actual ideologies that are in the center, that this is a one-off thing. That without Eric Adams' various predilections and problems when it came to his legal situation, that without the issues that dogged Andrew Cuomo out of his political career in the first place, that without sort of a weird circumstance in New York where you had this underlying and in place group of Democratic Socialist activists based in large part on their success running someone like AOC, Zoran Mamdani and the effect of his presence within a Democratic coalition would be nothing but a blip. I think it's a wildfire. I think that it's going to take off in cities across the country and in states across the country and primaries across the country to even greater degree. And I think that you see this playing out in the effort to spin candidates in other races as well, even radical candidates who look like they would be losers on a general ticket, as being people who have the backing of this cohort that is younger, that is more socialist, but almost always comes from the same kinds of elite backgrounds as the establishment figures that they're trying to replace. They are LARPing as being working class as opposed to actually being that way. Matt Taibbi has a great essay on this at Racket News, focused on the race in Maine, where a graduate of Hotchkiss is describing himself as a working class oysterman. We'll see if he gets taken down by some of the controversies around tattoos and the like. But one of the issues that I think people need to understand that is going on underneath this is that the cohort that runs the Democratic Party has fundamentally changed in the last 15 years in a way that is similar and in some ways has helped drive the success of the new Trump coalition on the right. You have seen the shift of middle and working class voters into the coalition of the right, the shift of the elites overwhelmingly into the left in terms of their priorities, whether it comes to liberal Republicans who cared about climate change or who were soft on trans issues and the like, going and becoming Democrats effectively, whether it's seeing the working class Hispanic and Black members of society, middle class members as well, who have shifted over within the Trumpian coalition because of his appeal to their priorities. We are seeing these things echo in the form of the radicalism of the left, because those same elites are the ones who can tolerate such things. When they hear tax the rich, they understand how to navigate around that. Or if in the case of some of these individuals, they view it simply as a way to shift the focus and to blame others, blame people of convenience in ways that does not actually reflect what is going on within the problems that affect New York City, that have continued to affect it, in fact, since COVID. When you go after the cops the way that Zohran Mamdani does, when you talk about replacing them en masse in the subway system with social workers and the like, the people who you are exposing to that type of experience with crime, the risk of crime, the presence of it around your family as you try to navigate the city, those people are the working and middle class people of that city. They are not the elites that can afford the ridiculous luxury good of the type of champagne socialism that Mamdani represents, flitting around the U.S. Open, backed with glowing reviews from Condé Nast in all its forms. This is someone who the elites of the left want to see succeed. And I think, given the fact that the social media has enraged and inflamed the base of the Democratic Party behind such ideas, it's to a degree now where it's not going to go away. Following the rally that you saw happen with AOC out there essentially triumphantly declaring victory, Mamdani has in fact already begun moving in areas of policy before even actually winning the election or being sworn in as mayor at an unprecedented degree. AOC got into it on X with Riley Gaines and tried to dunk on her for coming in fifth when she was competing against a man swimming against women in nationals. Of course, coming fifth in nationals is a pretty strong, respectful thing. And then going after her when Riley Gaines said she'd be happy to debate her anytime by saying, I would challenge this person to get a real job. One of my favorite accounts to follow, Political Math, he's a pretty heterodox thinker, responds, so the AOC platform is, lol, you got beat by a dude in a women's league and being a mom isn't a real job. She is a parody of Democrat dysfunction. Yes, on a certain level, that's true. But on another, I think it's actually the form of democratic function that we are going to see for the foreseeable future. The past is the types that tried to hide this, that tried to find a path, the likes of which these other Democratic PACs are screaming to high heaven, that didn't have 70% of voters thinking that the Democratic Party is out of touch. AOC is fine being out of touch. She's fine being called crazy because she has an almost religious devotion to the Marxist socialist values she and her other members of the squad and beyond have accepted. Many people on the right dismissed these people as jokes, as being people that shouldn't be taken seriously. I think they were always mistaken. You always needed to take them seriously because they speak with that ravenous quality that only the most extreme believers have. I'm Ben Domenech. You're listening to another edition of The Big Ben Show. I'd like to hear your reaction to this and what you think about the threat of a Democratic Party that is effectively run by its most extreme members. Leave a comment for us below, and thank you again for listening. We'll have more coming back with Ethan Strauss and with the Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares. Happy to welcome to the Big Ben Show Ethan Strauss. He is the proprietor of the House of Strauss newsletter, which you can subscribe to on Substack. You should definitely listen to his excellent podcast. You can follow him on X at Sherwood Strauss. Ethan, thank you so much for taking the time to join the Big Ben Show today.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
So anybody who knows Ethan's work knows what I'm about to discuss with him, which is this crazy and incredible story laid out last week by the FBI in a dramatic series of press conferences where you heard just about every sports reference that you could possibly hear from a bunch of people who don't normally get to use those in their jargon. And I would like to just start, Ethan, by giving you the floor to give people the overall picture of what seems to you to be the most important aspects of this gambling and sports corruption, poker, the NBA, et cetera, story. Now that you've had a little bit of time to process it and look at what really matters the most coming out of it.
Yeah, it was a little confusing because there are two indictments, and in a way, the more colorful of the indictments is less pertinent to what's going on in the NBA and the sports world. And I'm referring to these illegal rigged poker games that allegedly have ties to the mob that are using not technically former, but current head coach of the Blazers, Chauncey Billups, as this lure to get pro poker players, and then X-ray goggles or X-ray whatever tables that they're using to rob the poker players in an illegal gambling ring. That's very colorful. That's not pertinent exactly to fans in the leagues. What's more pertinent, specifically, we just look at Billups, because there are different allegations, different things in the indictment. With Billups, it's that he revealed inside information on his Blazers tanking. For those who do not know, you get a better draft pick. You get a better chance at a better player if you're the worst team. And so it said in the indictment that Billups conveyed that the Portland Trail Blazers were trying to lose, specifically in a March 24th game against the Bulls, where they just effectively sat everybody and lost by a bunch. And so that one right there, I want to isolate that one. I'm not doing the proper exposition because there's so much there, because I think this has been overlooked by sports media. That looks like a coach shaving points. That's what it looks like to me. And we don't actually know. I mean, this is almost, the FBI might not have enough, because it said that Billups was conveying that his team was trying to lose. I don't know the Blazers were trying to lose. They never announced they were trying to lose. I don't know if the GM of the Blazers directed Chauncey Billups to do that. There are all sorts of questions, Ben, that I think we might be getting answers out of if the media was differently oriented, or if it was 10 years ago. This, to me, looks like a coach intentionally lost a game to convey information to gamblers, if that is true, if what's in the indictment is true. Because it's not just that Billups was communicating to gamblers, oh, the Blazers are trying to lose. He's the coach. He's the coach, unless he's Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction, where he gets this sort of sting of pride and decides to win the fight and not take a dive. He's trying to lose that game, if that's the scenario that we're reading in the indictment. So there's a lot there. I haven't gone over it completely. There's Terry Rozier, Scary Terry, prop betting or conveying to unsavory characters that he's not going to hit the over on his prop bet and only playing a few minutes. It's a mess, Ben. Wherever you want to take it, let's go with it.
Well, let's start with just how happy do you think all those Department of Justice guys were to finally be able to stand at a podium and say La Cosa Nostra? I mean,
I didn't know the mob. I didn't know the mob still existed. It's a subplot in all of this. The Sopranos were teaching me that this thing's on its way out. They're getting their hooks into the NBA, Ben. It was very surprising, but yeah, it's colorful press conference.
So what's amazing that happened after these comments came out, obviously, and these cases were laid out in the public, is that people started going back through all the different conversations that had been happening, many of them in public, since so many of these players have or participate in podcasts and conversations that openly teased some of the aspects of this. And I think no one was more prominent in that regard than Gilbert Arenas, one of my favorite players, mostly off the court. but one of the things that he's leaned into from this is he even went on to his podcast the other day with a brown bag that had been labeled informant lunch on it. So he's leaning into this idea that he is the one who sort of outed some of these people involved because of an arrest that happened at a home that I guess he owns in Encino, where one of these poker games was reportedly taking place. Has anybody done kind of the Charlie and Always Sunny connect the lines of string moments yet of how we got to this point to find like what really pivoted to make these poker games something that got the FBI's attention?
Yeah, if I had to make a guess, it's almost too tidy for it to be Arenas. And I also think that if it was actually Arenas, it would be insane for him to draw attention to it. The man he nearly famously got shot once already. It would be crazy to poke the bear in this way, but that's what people think. I think it's a nice story. I got my hair cut and my barber was saying, oh, I think Arenas gave them all up. I don't know if that's the case. This doesn't seem to be the slickest of operations beyond the actual robbing. And I mean, okay, there's just so much here, big picture, in addition to the, the illegal poker games, the various mobs. With Arenas, it's the Israeli mob. With Billups, it appears to be the Italian mob. I didn't know, Ben, that there was this sort of involvement, and it would be, as much as I would want to believe that Arenas has turned informant in a cartoonish way, because you never see snitches being proud of their snitchery, as it were. I mean, that would be truly transgressive. It's just hard for me to believe that's what's actually going on here.
Yeah, I think Agent Zero is not probably going to be the only answer to this. Let's talk about the poker first. To me, while it does feature major celebrities and does seem like something that would come out of a Safdie movie, it is actually the much less interesting and much less applicable or dangerous aspect to this story. Massive illegal poker games where people are, putting down and losing, more than $1 million in a single night, according to this investigation. And it's, members of the mob bringing in basically, whales to target and using these, paying these former NBA players or, current NBA coaches to basically give the games an imprimatur. Well, that's, to me, something that is a criminal act that is of a piece with other criminal acts. Yeah. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who get robbed at illegal poker games. Am I wrong to have that attitude towards it?
I don't think you're wrong to have a lack of sympathy. I'm not sure it's the type of thing that you should just let metastasize without the feds stepping in. And I think one of the lures of the illegal poker games, as is told to me, Ben, not from personal experience, because you can do poker, you can play at the Bellagio. So why are people doing it illegally? It's because they have, let's say, ladies of the night and perhaps illicit drugs. I think that's part of the allure, is these other accoutrements. So that's something that the feds might need to step in and squelch if it's happening. But to what you're saying, there's no rule for the leagues in that. If a former player gets caught up in illegal poker games or some sort of scheme, there's no rule for NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. The only meaning it has, beyond that characters from these illegal poker games are engaged in what actually matters to the leagues, I'd say is this. It's a reveal. It's an indicator. Athletes like to gamble. They like to gamble a lot. And when these leagues went all in on legalized sports betting, with this assumption that everything is going to stay clean and wonderful, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Adam Silver made that kind of argument in the pages of the New York Times in 2014 when advocating for this new revolution of legalized sports betting. There might have been a bit of naivete about the professional athlete and what they're into, and this assumption that they're into what other people are into, because the vibe has shifted, Ben. I'm going to give a non-PC analogy. Sure. It kind of reminds me of just introducing something to a population that doesn't have an immunity to it, like the conquistadors coming in and giving firewater to the natives. That's what it reminds me of when you take legalized betting and put sports betting ads everywhere and introduce it to the highly competitive, not always great decision-making professional athlete who I see during Summer League in the NBA and Vegas up at all hours at the tables. I don't know if this is the population you can introduce that to, but I think the people at the top in the boardrooms, they only saw profit and they didn't want to admit that part of it to themselves.
You went with conquistadors. I thought you were going to go with North Korean soldiers' access to internet porn during the Ukrainian conflict. But the thing that is is interesting to me about this in terms of the sunlight is the best disinfectant is that someone could come back to you with the argument that in this case, that's the reason why something like the Terry Rozier thing is very easy to catch. Because if you see a ton of money coming in on an individual player prop series of bets that is odd or off the expectations of the massive systems that have been built by FanDuel and DraftKings and all of the others to analyze things and to win and to prevent people from winning a lot of money, they flag that and they say this is a weird series of bets. This is something we're going to have to look at. They'll lock accounts. They'll kick people off ultimately if it's repeated. They're professional sharps who have all these stories to tell if you pay attention to it. What do you say to that? Which is basically that this is an example of the system working.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Simpsons line about how alcohol is the cause and solution to all of the world's problems. I mean, I like this idea that we need more gambling to catch the gamblers. It's really an interesting one. You can't refute it. It's impossible to refute it. I would say I don't think that there are nearly as many of these scandals happening in the past before sports betting advertisements were all over the place. I mean, illegality is a taboo that matters to a lot of people. And if something is not illegal, then they become more open to it. And there's this push-pull because we want consenting adults to be able to choose their vices to a degree. But I also think that this is violating my political ideology, Ben. Not that anybody cares about my political ideology, but I do have an ideology. It's called how did that work outism. That's my political ideology. And this is starting to fail that test. When we have a new gambling scandal every few months, even if you're trying to make the argument to me that all that's happening is that we're doing a better job at catching these guys, which I don't believe. I just think we have a bunch of these guys doing this sort of illegal activity and harming the integrity of the game. It's just violating that principle. If it was going great, I'd say it's going great and it's all for the profit. But right now, it doesn't seem like it's going great beyond the leagues making an extra buck and selling the owners on how they're going to make more in the future.
I'm going to loop back to that aspect of this in just a second, but let me double down on the idea that this is not as big of a problem as people are imagining it to be. The thing that I think is very true is that players have been doing this for a very long time and that they've been doing it with people who have been placing illegal bets. They've been doing it because it was actually a lot easier to place illegal bets than many people who never got into that, certainly didn't get into it when they were a teenager, not that I would know anything about that, have basically been operating under the assumption that it was not easy to place bets beforehand, before the ubiquity of all of these different accounts and the regulations and the laws required along with those. The difference being, of course, that you have no recourse in that situation when a player does something that is clearly corrupt or just, starts behaving in a way which is particularly possible and uniquely noticeable when it comes to the NBA, I would argue, that is at odds with what your expectations would be. And, of course, there's the role of the refs as well and the Tim Donaghy experience and everything related to that. I personally think that this is a sorting out period, that all of this stuff is new. The players themselves don't know what they can and can't get away with. Some of the things that people, by the way, have gotten caught for, particularly in the NFL when it comes to some of the bets that they were placing, it's like ridiculous. You thought you were going to get away with that, and that to me is an indication that this is going to be something that is worked through. And on a certain level, again, the Supreme Court's decision is not getting undone. This is not going to just go back in the bottle. There's going to have to be some kind of new medium that is found. Do you think that I'm wrong to think that way, that this is kind of a transitionary period, basically?
No, I don't think you're wrong that this isn't going back in the bottle and that we're just going to learn to live with this because we're not changing the laws of the land and the leagues are not of the mindset that they want to undo this. Now, whether it's a sorting out period where the players learn to stop doing this, I think that's more debatable. And I don't think this was going on at nearly the scale before as it's going on right now. Part of that is because the gambling is so pervasive And that's how the players get down a bad path. If you remember, whoever that was who played the Terminator villain when he was in The Sopranos and he ran that sporting goods store, he gets in with the gambling, he gets the gambling debts, and then he's suddenly open to the mob taking over his store and more illegality to spackle over the problems that he incurred for himself with the gambling. I think that the more legalized sports betting, legalized gambling there is, the more athletes get involved in it, the more they get in a hole, the more you see situations like this playing out. And I don't think that's what was happening, say, in the 1990s. Even if we had the Tim Donaghy scandal with a ref getting involved, I don't think it was happening at this particular scale. And the crazy thing to me, Ben, is that I could never have imagined a coach being involved in something like this. In theory, winning is everything to the coach and the reputation. I think that's a bad sign, that it's not just about people getting caught. It's about more people doing it. So to what you were saying, yeah, it's a sorting out period. Yeah, they're not going to undo it. But I don't think that this is the last of these scandals by any stretch. I wouldn't be shocked if we have a few of these every few months for the next 10 years and we just learn to live with it.
Well, I think a big portion of this that is going to be true about what you're saying there is the expansion into the college situation, because now with NIL money, those younger players have a lot more money to gamble with, and are going to do, I think, things that are potentially risky there. Your concept that you return to quite regularly in your writing and on your podcast is how the sports industry and the media industry in general have engaged in fracking the pie. That essentially you can't get the concept is, and as I understand it, is that you can't necessarily get more money out of the fans of the sport without doing things that basically encourage them and compel them to spend more money in new and interesting ways, and that a big part of that has gone into this whole league association with gambling. My issue is that right now, this story has ripped across, the headlines, and watching live, Shams come on and talk about this is pretty, it's pretty amazing to see, because you've got one of the biggest purported, sports media properties. I would argue they're mostly not sports media anymore, but that's the different argument. ESPN, that has its own terrible, by the way, platform, ESPN Bet, that they're promoting constantly on every chyron, having to talk about this after years when this was just kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, just off the camera conversation that was happening around games. And now it's front and center. And that creates inherent conflict that is advanced, of course, by the relationships between agents who represent both media figures and sports figures, the relationships and the investments of major sports leagues that have gotten into bed with ESPN. To me, this is all of a piece. It's a much bigger problem on a much larger scale than anything related to players, betting on props or coaches shaving points.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know we were going to get into the conflict of interest aspect of it, but that is almost definitional to what's happened in sports media over the last 10 years. Andy Miller, that's a name. Do you even know that name? I would suspect you don't, but you follow these things, you might. Do you know who Andy Miller is?
He's on the edge of my awareness. Yes.
Yes. He's a famous NBA agent, now a coach's agent working for Clutch. And when I look up and down the indictment, I just see a ton of names, a ton of player names that have Andy Miller connections.
I did not make that connection.
Nobody's talking about that. Nobody, when I look at ESPN, is talking about how Chauncey Billups, coach of the Blazers, when he did get indicted, was wearing a Clutch Sports Group hoodie. They don't want to touch that because they're all about breaking news, and they want a good relationship with Clutch Sports, the player agency that is, I guess, quasi-founded, not officially, but kind of officially founded by LeBron James.
Yes.
And so there's this weird corruption. We don't even call it corruption because we take it for granted that the sports media has just come to be defined by. I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush and say everybody's on the take, everybody's conflicted, everybody's corrupted, but you just see conflicts of interest everywhere, and it's produced these weird outcomes to where you can't trust them to tell a story, and it actually has an impact on what stories become stories. It's crazy to me that perhaps the best closer in baseball was banished for allegedly throwing pitches in the dirt for the sake of prop bets. And the closer, the best closer, Mariano Rivera award winner 2 times over, doing that, barely a story. Here today, gone tomorrow. I think that one of the reasons for that is because everybody has this conflict of interest and is incentivized not to make too big a deal of the gambling stuff. So as colorful as this story is, I don't expect us to stay on it in the way that would have happened in the early 2000s, where this would have been the biggest story and we would have been covering it for months. There's just this impetus, there's this incentive structure that you don't mess with anything that's about your bottom line, and that gets in the way of trying to find the truth and trying to tell a story about what's going on.
Why does the NBA have such a unique position within this? Because the general assumption that I and many of my friends have is that the NBA has the biggest problem with corruption of any of the leagues. That it's had that problem for a long time, that it's dealt with it in different ways. You know, people used to go into semi-retirement and just play baseball for a little while. And there's been, this constant feeling that there's corruption there that even extends to draft picks and trades and things of that nature that don't make any sense to fans in terms of the decisions that are being made. Why do you think that is the case? And I would argue really strongly that it is across the sports fandom, that attitude exists.
Yeah. Okay. So there are a few different aspects to it. I think the incentive structures, to use that word again, are perverse. And the perversity of those incentive structures creates situations where you're supposed to do something bad for the sake of something good. And right there, starting out, you're dirty. The idea that you need to lose more games to get a better draft pick, and a draft pick in the NBA, unlike other sports, it can just change everything. It's one of 5 guys on the court. So you've got this incentive to try to lose while pretending like you're trying to win. That's the case in the NFL, by the way. But the difference there is it's a gladiator sport. You're not going to go out as a middle linebacker and try to play poorly. You're going to get killed. The NBA doesn't have that. It's just easier to rig in that way. And you see that in the indictment, this idea that, this breaks my brain. I want to just communicate it. It's complicated to me that Chauncey Billups is accused of telling gamblers that his team was trying to lose, but it wasn't him trying to lose. It was his management trying to lose and telling him to try to lose. And they would never admit to trying to do that, even though we all know teams do that. So that right there is an example of this convoluted topsy-turvy world. And I think that's a big aspect. I think the tanking aspect, that incentive, that's just one of a few. The other one that you're talking about how they want certain teams to get certain players, I think that has more to do with how the NBA is unusual in this respect, that if one team makes the finals, twice as many people are going to watch than if another team makes the NBA finals. Yeah. The NFL is not like that. The NFL is like, for a conference championship, it will be 50 million or 55 million, depending on which team makes it and which quarterback plays. The NBA is twice. The NBA is tens of millions of dollars getting made for the advertisers based on which team makes it. I think that right there is another incentive structure that makes people doubt fair or unfair.
Mm-hmm. The only time that I can say that I saw this matter in the NFL, Doug Peterson for the Eagles decided to make a quarterback change at the last minute of the last game of the season, and he got fired for it. And that wasn't even necessarily tanking. It was just like, we don't need to win this game. It's not going to help us one way or the other. We might as well give the other team the opportunity to win and get a better draft pick. To me, there's just more direct consequences and as well. But it is funny because the actual thing we should be talking about as it relates to this, but from a logical perspective, is Shohei, at this particular moment, but nobody's talking about it.
Well, this is what I'm saying. That would be the biggest story, and who the hell knows what happened, and the translator ultimately took the fall. But there are stories that we would make the biggest story in sports. I don't think any of my neighbors know who Emmanuel Clase is, the closer. That would be a top 2 sports story in 1998. That the top closer was just spiking pitches in the dirt. And I don't know if we want to call that shaving points or whatever. We need a new term for it. But the incentive is hear no evil, see no evil. That's the other story we're not even getting into, Ben. It's not just the leagues that are taking all this money. I saw it was asked by one of the financial reporters, can't remember who, what good has come of the gambling legalization. And people were arguing. And I said, and I meant it without irony, it funded a lot of great sport podcasts that I enjoy.
Yes, it has. And in fact, I have been thinking ever since I heard you say that a really good way to address this in a completely unserious but trollish way would be to have some kind of advertising restriction on these gambling leagues where you can't advertise on television during games or something like that. You can only advertise on podcasts.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean,
the Ringer just spikes 100x, that kind of thing. So that's amazing. That would make my friends even more gainfully employed in sports media. Even if it would take a bite out of the league. And I might actually be open to that, just in terms of having some regulation. We had restrictions on alcohol advertising forever, I mean, and it didn't stop people from buying alcohol. So, I mean, I just think, if you, I don't know, it's just a thought experiment. Let's wrap up with this. I think personally, that this is just the tip of the iceberg, that, if anything, they probably rushed this a little bit, even though obviously the FBI was framing this, Cash Patel was framing this as like this long running thing and, very thorough and that type of thing. I am skeptical enough of the behavior of the Department of Justice and the FBI to basically assume sometimes that when they find something that involves a celebrity or a big name, they get really hot to trot and they, they rush things forward just in order to have that scalp or to make that headline. Do you think that we are going to see a cascade effect of finding, 100 more examples of Terry Rozier's?
I wouldn't go that far, but I think it would be naive to think that these events that date back to 2023 stopped back then. I would think so. I think a lot of people naively assumed, because it doesn't make sense. As you were saying, look, and this is my PSA, if you're a professional athlete watching this, don't do this. You will get caught. You will get caught. 100% certainty you will get caught. You will get caught because, and the leagues can't reveal why you'll get caught, which is a funny irony, Ben. You'll get caught because it's rigged. You're never supposed to win. You are never supposed to win. If somebody is winning, they immediately know who's winning and they shut it down. And if it's due to insider betting, they find out about it. I know that. You know that. I think the leagues thought players would know that, but we just keep getting new players, new naive players that get involved in the league. And I just don't think that the message is getting through, or they believe they'll be the ones to get away with it. And you're just going to always have somebody like that involved in your league. So I think we're going to get more Terry Rozier's, and the result is we'll have these sorts of scandals. I'll come on your show, I'll discuss it, and it will just keep going. I think the league doesn't have an appetite to shut it all down, and we're not changing the laws, as you said.
They need to get back to the old ways, Ethan. They need to get back to playing poker on the airplane, and they need to get back to making $50,000 bets on golf putts. It was a healthier time.
They're still doing that too.
They're still doing it too.
They've got quite the appetite, Ben. They love to gamble. That's one of the reasons this isn't completely working. They love to gamble. The athletes do.
Yes, and it's part of what makes them great. You can follow Ethan on X at Sherwood Strauss. You should subscribe to House of Strauss, his excellent Substack and podcast. Thank you so much, Ethan, for taking the time to join the Big Ben Show and explain this today.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Joining me now on the Big Ben Show, happy to welcome the Attorney General of the great Commonwealth of Virginia, Jason Miyares. I want to start, sir, with just asking you about how much this race has changed in the last month. People nationally, I think, were not paying that much attention to Virginia until the unfolding of multiple stories that have played out in the media, and certainly here at Fox, is something that has attracted the attention of a lot of viewers in a way that has attracted a ton of attention. How much has your race in particular changed, and the focus of it changed in the past month?
Well, Ben, it's great to be with you. A big fan. Listen, I think fundamentally it has changed this race from just about politics to almost a referendum on decency. We have never had anyone run for Attorney General that we have found anywhere in the nation that has literally advocated for violence against children. We've never had anybody that's run for AG that we have found anywhere that has ever advocated for violence against cops. That he's running to be the top prosecutor in the state of Virginia while he's under criminal investigation by a special prosecutor that was just appointed last week. So it has become a unique moment. It was not on my bingo card to be fielding press calls from news outlets as far away as Sydney, Australia, and Munich, Germany, and London, England, which shows you also internationally how many people have been paying attention to this. But obviously, the press we've gotten nationally, the coverage we've gotten from newspapers around the country, I think people fundamentally look at this and they've realized that this is now so much more than politics. And I think that is why it has changed the dynamics of my race so much in just 30 days.
Is this a marker where we can say that the old attitude of the Virginia way is truly dead? Or do you view it as something that could actually be a turning point for the Commonwealth to return to some of the ways that it had in the past of dealing across party lines and rejecting this, just given the level of backlash that we've seen to those expressions from Jay Jones?
Well, I mean, I think, that for your listeners, the Virginia way was always this mindset we had in Richmond that despite some of the rhetoric and language in Washington, that in Richmond we expected our leaders to conduct themselves with a certain level of civility and decorum. And that's been kind of a reference points that's been used for decades. That has been frayed at the edges the last couple of years, but I do think, as I've kind of noted in my debate that I had with Jay, the Virginia way and that sense of decency is directly on the ballot. I'll give you an example. Ben, I was campaigning last weekend at the James Madison University football game, and I had a mom come up to me, and she was from Vienna, and she said, "Listen, I'm a Democrat. I'm voting for Abigail. I'm actually voting straight D in the races this year, except yours." She's like, "I am voting for you for two reasons. One, I do think you're competent. I don't agree with all your politics, but you're a competent attorney general." And she said, "And we can't reward somebody who has advocated for this kind of language of violence against kids." She said this to me. She said, "I don't want to see Virginia become the laughing stock for the entire country." Mm-hmm. And if for some reason he found a way to win with all of this language, we would be the butt of so much derision around the country that they elevated somebody that is so not just unqualified for the job, but has obviously said the things that he said against innocent children and against cops. So that was a little bit of a startling moment. I hadn't processed it that way, but voters are going to come to their calculus different ways. But I thought it was an interesting observation, and listen, I see it when I go out. Not just when I'm campaigning, the few moments I'm home and I got to run up to the store, where people stop me and they say, either I'm a Democrat or I'm an independent. I'm splitting my ticket with you this year. I just can't believe what your opponent has said. So I do think that's why you've seen that reflective in both the polling and the shift, and now, that sense that this is so much more than just politics.
I know it from talking to my neighbors, and for our listeners, I'll remind them that I live in one of the bluest areas of Virginia. And one thing that I did notice, just anecdotally, in addition to talking to them, is, you have a lot more signs here that showed up in the last couple of weeks than you did before. And I think it's kind of people saying, hey, I may be living in this area and you may have confidence about what I'm doing when it comes to voting, expecting me to vote D in other areas, but they just can't stand it. And to me, that's very healthy, especially at this moment, especially coming after the attempted assassinations of the president, the successful, unfortunately and sadly, assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Right.
I feel like it's a real need to have some kind of political consequences for this. Why hasn't the nominee for the governor's race? Why haven't other Democrats been able to and willing to go to the point of saying this is a guy who really should step down? He should step out of this race at this point.
I really don't know. And that's going to be, I think, a moment of reflection for us as a nation. At the end of the day, this is a question that if the legacy media wanted to ask, questions of candidates, this is a question they should ask of Abigail Spanberger, which would be this: would you hire Jay Jones to be in your cabinet? And if the answer is no, then why are you continuing to ask Virginians to elect him to be the top prosecutor in the state of Virginia? Yeah. Now, at the debate, she was asked 3 different times whether she still endorsed him, and 3 different times she dodged it and said it's up to the voters to decide. So, and if you've noticed, she hasn't done any campaign appearances with him. There's a picture circulating online of her campaign bus that has very inauspiciously removed Jay Jones's name off the campaign bus. So I think she recognizes that this is obviously not the message she wants to have to deal with, but that's called leadership. And it's interesting that, you've had other people from out of state. The governor of Kentucky, the Democrat, said he didn't think he could vote for Jay Jones. So there are a few that have spoken out of the state, but it is a little bit unsettling to me to see in this kind of era of hyper-partisanship that people can't even set aside and say, you know what, there's some boundaries that are red lines we don't cross. Talking this way is one of them. And here's what bothers me, Ben, that Abigail and Warner and Kane, they all know this too. I served in the General Assembly with Jay Jones and Todd Gilbert. And Todd Gilbert's a good friend. He was my roommate. We would rent a house together during the General Assembly session, me, him, and another delegate. And so I know him. Jennifer Gilbert would come to the assembly. She's absolutely lovely. She'd bring those kids. Jay has met Jennifer. And we would see those kids running in the hallways. And so these are real flesh and blood human beings that he knows personally. He served with Todd. He's met his wife. This is a real husband and father, a real wife and mother, real children he has seen with his own eyes. To look at and say what he said, I think is so unconscionable. How could he ever, one of the most big missions in my office, the Attorney General, is fighting human trafficking. And we deal with so many different groups, so many law enforcement agencies, and so many survivors, many of which been trafficked since they were children. How can he ever stand at a human trafficking summit talking to those survivors when everybody in the room knows this is a man who literally has advocated for violence against children, people that are the survivors of violence when they were children? And you just think about this, and it makes no sense at all. And to your point, you have to wonder if there's some reason somebody running to be the top prosecutor of a state could use this language. It gives a permission slip to every other candidate in every other state thinking, you know what, I could say pretty much anything, even violence against a man's family, and it doesn't really matter. And I think it's an inflection point for the country. I really do.
I agree. I want to talk to you about crime for a moment. The group Welcome, which is a Democratic Party consultant group, has a study out this week, in fact, that is a pushback basically against radical progressives and socialists like Zoran Mondani, or it can be read as such, where it highlights basically the Democrat shift on crime as being one that has significantly hurt them, on the level with their rhetoric about trans issues and on their record of weakness on the border, that crime is now up there as at the same level in terms of what people just think Democrats don't take seriously. There was a whole generation of Democratic leaders, as you know, in Virginia and across the country, where Democrats in the Bill Clinton era made a priority of saying we are going to be tough on crime as a way to push back against big city mayors and the like who are viewed as too soft. Is there any opportunity to see that happen to this Democratic Party, or do you think that they've just gone so far down this road of basically giving Soros-backed prosecutors and people who are ideologically akin to them just total leeway and being soft on crime?
Well, you are right that they've become a bit of an, in an ideological straitjacket that they cannot get out of. And the reality is they have pushed a variety of far-left social justice issues that are widely unpopular. And I like to say that the only thing you learn from history is no one learns from history. There is nothing that they are advocating today that was not tried in the 1970s with disastrous results. No cash bail, that was tried before. Getting rid of any mandatory minimums, early release of violent offenders, it was all tried before. And you look at the trajectory, it became a huge issue starting in the 70s. And then why were Republicans so successful in the 80s and 90s? One of them, a lot of reasons, was people didn't trust Democrats on public safety issues. We've seen this play out in Virginia. My race was already a very tight race in many ways before this happened, because when you asked Virginians which party you trust more in public safety, they would say Republicans. And to give you an idea of what happened in Virginia, up until George Allen came into office, our great former governor, he came into office, he got sworn in 1992. The average sentence, the average time of your sentence you actually served in Virginia was about 1/4 of your sentence. So if you're a rapist sentenced to 16 years in prison, you would get out in 4 years. And there was a pushback. One of George Allen's big issues in 92, and we're actually in the 93 election, so it was 94, he got sworn in, was abolition of parole. After that, we had something called truth in sentencing in Virginia. You had to serve 85, 90% of your sentence. After 2020, the left wing of the Democratic Party in Richmond essentially repealed it. They adopted this thing called the Earned Sentence Credit Program. It's really the early felon release program. They did a delayed enactment clause, so it would not go into effect until 2023, after myself and Governor Youngkin were already in office, and every year we've tried to repeal it. Doesn't matter. These are the numbers, Ben. Its first year, 2023, 9,638 felons were released early. In less than 2 years, 49.8% have already been rearrested. It's a stunning number. And
that's shocking.
Oh, it's shocking.
I'm probably less shocked than the average person, but that's just
but the numbers are stunning. So there are Virginians have been murdered and raped and assaulted today by somebody that's supposed to be behind bars in prison. Those numbers are only going to go up. I got the latest numbers for 2024. I think it's less than a year, about 30% have been rearrested. I got to get the exact numbers there. But that is the reality. This is only going to increase every year. You could have these human interest story. It was actually one of the ads I ran. Daniel Vanover was an absolute evil man that got out early. Within months of getting out early, started grooming and brutally raping an 11-year-old girl. And he should have never been in a position to harm her. And those are the types of stories that, and my opponent, by the way, Jay Jones, supported all of this. He was a left-wing social justice warrior when he served in the assembly. So I think those are those stories, those issues that continue to bubble up to the surface, and it's only going to continue. And again, basically, for the progressive left, they want to bring back the same policy that were tried before the 1970s. And we know the end result was disastrous. And we've seen, and listen, I don't think it's good for our greatest cities in our country, whether it's New York or LA, to be places where everyday Americans don't feel comfortable visiting because they don't feel safe. And that's not good. It's not good to have these left-wing prosecutors that won't do their jobs, or these mayors that won't do theirs. Before the president sent in the National Guard to Washington, D.C., the average arrest record for somebody picked up on a homicide charge in Washington, D.C. was 11 prior arrests. 11. It's the catch and release program that people just think, how is this person able to still be in a position to harm Americans. And it is an issue, to your point.
I will ask, just because you brought it up about this DC crime situation. I'm sure that you are aware of the some of the initial reports, and the Oversight Committee on Capitol Hill is investigating this about the idea that DC had been either purposefully or through a number of different methods that they deployed, attempting to play down the crime in the city by gaming the numbers or by recategorizing things. Could you explain a little bit about what goes into that type of thing and what your reaction is from across the Potomac?
Yeah, I mean, I was, I'm the top prosecutor in Virginia. I started my career as a prosecutor in my hometown of Virginia Beach. And so, listen, what a lot of these left-wing DAs have done is that they will claim, well, listen, our felonies are down in our jurisdiction. What they aren't saying is because we pled them all out to misdemeanors, right? I had a case, I remember 2 years ago, I did a kind of a town hall with the Fairfax Police Union in Fairfax, Virginia. They have a very left-wing Soros prosecutor by the name of Steve Descano. And they were telling me that because Descano did not believe in mandatory minimums, that they would immediately null pros, i.e. dismiss, that the prosecutor would essentially anything that had a mandatory minimum charge. So he gave me an example of somebody that was a convicted heroin dealer that was picked up. He had massive quantities of heroin in his car, plus scales and a firearm. And in Virginia, if you have dealing drugs with a firearm, you get a mandatory minimum sentence. Immediately saw that just basically the Fairfax office just dismissed and null pros the gun charge, and eventually ended up pleading out to going instead of possession with intent to distribute, simply possession. So these felonies all got reduced to a simple possession charge. Somebody who had a prior record. They do this time and time again, but what I often point out is they can't hide the bodies. In other words, you can massage the numbers in a lot of ways, but one thing you cannot do is massage the murder rate. And one thing we've done in Virginia, to give an example, is we did the opposite track. We launched something called Operation Ceasefire, going after these repeat violent offenders. I'll just give you one example of the city of Roanoke. What we found was 0.12% of the population of the city of Roanoke, that's less than 1/5 of 1%, were committing over 30% of the homicides. And a lot of this, so much of this is tied to narcotics dealing. So we went after these repeat violent offenders. We investigated them, indicted them, and prosecuted them. The murder rate in Roanoke has dropped 62%. So, proven methods work. And I'm a data-driven guy. And too many people, Ben, and particularly in Washington, D.C., they ask everybody to judge them by their intentions, not their results. Right? That's Washington, D.C. at its core. Nobody in private sector, nobody in the military, nobody in a sports team. You can imagine if Washington is like, we're going to go for it on 4th and 27, and they call an audible and go for it, and the coach is like, why did you do that? You say, well, you can't judge me. I meant to get the first down. That's D.C. They always ask you, well, we want a more quote unquote equitable justice system. Well, that's great by your intentions, but are you actually creating more victims and hurting more innocent people by adopting a system that is allowing repeat violent offenders to get back on the street to hurt more of the innocent?
I want to close out with this. You obviously are headed into this election with some renewed backing from a lot of people who are paying more attention, as we discussed. There are always national lessons taken away from these off-year elections, how they turn out one way or the other, whether we should take lessons from them or not. Do you think that just because of the nature of this race, it's going to be one where you hope people can at least get the message out of it that you can't say the kind of things that Jay Jones has and support them in any real way?
Yes, no doubt. I hope this is a national story about decency. And a wise Marine once told me, Ben, that if you go to Arlington National Cemetery and you walk among those crosses and those stars of David's, there's not an R or a D next to anyone's name. And to never forget that someone who thinks differently than you about politics has literally died for their country. We could all learn from that. And I keep a sign in my office in Richmond. I see it every day when I sit down at my desk in the Attorney General's office. It is my favorite quote from Thomas Jefferson, and it is this: I have never found the difference of opinion in politics, philosophy, or religion as cause to withdraw from a friend. It's just this mindset that we are so much more than politics. And I'm not going to withdraw the gift of friendship, much less the mandate of protection in my office from somebody over politics. So I do think that. I think it's why we've got such national attention. If there are people listening, not even in Virginia, that want to make sure we pass this test of decency, just go to standwithjason.com, and you can support and make sure that we get this over the finish line, because I do think this is a national story. I do think this gives a permission slip for anybody that has used even the most reprehensible rhetoric to think, you know what, I should run for this office and that office because, well, voters in Virginia, gave this person a pass. I don't think they will. Virginians are going to pass the test of decency and do the right thing.
Jason Miyares, Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Virginia, thank you so much for taking the time to join the Big Ben Show today.
Great to be with you, Ben.
And we're back on the Big Ben Show. I want to talk to you about some developments in the media and Hollywood landscape that are of significant interest, probably to our listeners more than a showrunner making jumps to different affiliations. A major announcement was put out by NBC that Taylor Sheridan is going to come over from his role in connection with Paramount within the next 3 years in a number of different manners to make new content for Peacock, their streaming network. This is obviously a real shift. Essentially, Paramount and its whole incidence of Paramount Plus and its whole existence as a streaming service is based on the success of Taylor Sheridan's shows, not just Yellowstone, but Tulsa King, Landman, all the different offshoots and the like. Sheridan is a rare showrunner in the sense that he doesn't just make shows, he doesn't just come up with the concepts of shows, but he actually writes the shows himself. So that makes him different than, say, Dick Wolf or Ryan Murphy or some of these other people where they play a role in the construction of these different shows, but they don't really write them, and really it's him and Shonda Rhimes who are viewed as the most desirable showrunners currently working in the industry. Sheridan's shows obviously have a certain style to them, one that's recognizable, whether they're set in the Old West, whether they're set in the New West, whether they're not even set in the West at all. And I think that those tropes have served him well in writing kind of a higher class of soap opera, or perhaps a more mid-appealing range of the gritty drama that we saw in the past from others. Whatever you think about his appeal, he's one of the most talented guys working in the industry. The question is whether this is something where you're bringing on a guy who is on the way up, or whether essentially Paramount was able to extract the best of his creative abilities from him in the form of those shows. Now, one thing that I do think this speaks to, though, is the dramatic influence in a sea of content where there is so much available to you from every streaming network, constantly updating, often not recognizable, and often having the level of quality of crappy things that are trying to steal your eyes back in the days of Blockbuster by imitating a more popular movie. That type of content has led us to a point where, with so much mid-tier stuff that's out there and lower-tier stuff that's out there, actual creatives, people who can run their own shows, who make their own movies, who have their own creative style, and who stand up, are as significant in this era, or perhaps even more significant than the people who star in their vehicle. People are just as likely, I think, to now go to a movie because of the person who directed it, or the person who made it, or the person who produced it, the person who wrote it, as opposed to going to a movie just because of who's starring in it. And I think that that's going to be a trend that I hope continues in this era of shifts and consolidation, of mergers within the creative media landscape. Now, ultimately, we'll see if Sheridan's bet on this situation is one that pays off. But choosing to be a big fish in a small pond paid off for him with Paramount, and perhaps it'll do so again with NBC as it tries to find its way forward with Peacock. But one thing that I do think is important to appreciate about this is That's the kind of people to start paying attention to. The creatives, the directors, the showrunners, and the writers who have something that actually sticks out, who have a style and have a manner of approach that is professional and interesting, and not just feeding you more slop, which is something that so many people have gotten used to. It's the creative equivalent of just getting a Chipotle bowl every day. And I'm tired of it personally, and I think that the audiences are tiring of it too. You've been listening to another edition of The Big Ben Show. You can follow us on X and on Instagram at Big Ben Show Fox. Follow me at B Domenech. We'll be back next week with more to dive back into the fray.